Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, November 5th, 2021. House Democrats start the day hoping to pass President Biden's two big domestic spending bills covering infrastructure and social programs, but run into opposition on the larger bill from a handful of House Democratic moderates, enough to ensure its defeat. Strong jobs report for October. Labor Department says U.S. added 531,000 jobs. Unemployment rate drops to 4.6%. Secretary of State Antony Blinken provides details on new efforts to investigate so-called Havana Syndrome, that serious health condition afflicting U.S. personnel overseas, first identified in Cuba and now several other countries, cause still unknown. And former Secretary of State Colin Powell remembered fondly by family, friends, and colleagues at a funeral service at Washington National Cathedral. From the Associated Press, top Democrats abruptly postponed an expected House vote Friday on their 10-year, nearly $2 trillion social and environmental measure as leaders long struggle to balance demands from progressives and moderates once again dogged the pillar of President Joe Biden's domestic agenda. In a bid to hand him a needed victory, leaders still prepared to try pushing an accompanying $1 trillion package of road and other infrastructure projects through the chamber and to his desk. But even that popular bill's fate was in doubt. Progressives threatened to vote against it, continuing their demand that the two measures be voted on together to pressure moderates to support the larger, more expensive social measure. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi speaking with reporters late afternoon about what's ahead.
Congresswoman Jayapal came out with a statement indicating that she will not support her caucus, the Progressive Caucus, the infrastructure bill, if it goes without Build Back Better, that she would rather wait until the CBO score comes and that moderates are on board both. Have you spoken to her, and do you have the votes right now for the infrastructure bill?
We all speak to each other quite regularly. In fact, it's not a chance to say I spoke once or twice. It's a constant conversation among all of us in our caucus. And the fact is, we believe it is necessary to pass the BIF so that these jobs can come online as soon as possible. We have waited a while. We had hoped to pass it sooner, but we can't wait too much later for the legislation. I do believe that there are a large number of members of the Progressive Caucus who will vote for the bill. That is my understanding. I whip the members all the time. I have my own. No, Mr. Clyburn has the official whip count. I have the Speaker's secret whip count. I don't tell anything that people tell me, not even you, my dear good friends, but I have a pretty good feel.
Do you have 218 votes to pass it?
We'll see, won't we?
Speaker Pelosi, the inability.
Anybody else?
Speaker Pelosi, your inability
Please.
We've seen this. There's going to be a vote. Okay, there's not going to be a vote. There's going to be a vote. There's not going to be a vote. At a certain point, do you worry that it starts to look like the Democrats can't get out of their own way?
No, welcome to my world. This is the Democratic Party. It is, well, Roger said it very well where he is. And it is a party whose vitality and diversity is something that we all respect and admire. We are not a lockstep party. We are not just speak as one person and nobody else needs to show up. And that exuberance is the vitality of our party, which we value and treasure and respect the different opinions within our party. One of the challenges that we have, though, because I've been here a long time, as have all three of us, in those days all of this would be done, but not on 24/7 platforms where their opinions going out, characterizations going out before anybody even knew what was going on. So it's an additional challenge, but I see every challenge as an opportunity.
The House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, along with the House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer and the House Majority Whip James Clyburn, with reporters on Capitol Hill. Cristina Marcos, congressional reporter for The Hill, has been following the ins and outs of today with the spending bill. She joins us now. Thank you very much. What is the latest for the infrastructure bill and the social spending bill?
It's been a crazy day on Capitol Hill, and for now, the House Democratic leaders are plowing ahead with plans that were first pitched by the Congressional Black Caucus earlier today to vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill that is sending that to President Biden's desk, and then also going forward with a procedural rule for the social spending package known as Build Back Better. However, that would stop short of actual passage on the social spending package, and so it's not clear yet if this plan is actually going to fly with progressives. So, but Democrats who are very eager for a win after their disappointing election showing for the party on Tuesday in Virginia and New Jersey, they're really eager for some kind of win after these talks have gone on for almost 2 months.
Take us back to the beginning of the day. When it started, we all expected the House's Democrats would bring up both bills, and then it hit a wall.
That's right. Yes, last night and this morning, leadership sources were expressing confidence that this was going to come together, that they would vote on passage of these two bills, even though, of course, the negotiations on the social spending package aren't finalized with the Senate, but it looks like they'd be able to go down this path. But within an hour or so after the House convened this morning, it became clear that there were still around half a dozen centrists who were still demanding that a congressional budget office analysis on the social spending package before moving forward. And despite hours of discussions with these moderates, the leadership was unable to find a solution that would satisfy them. And so then they're moving forward with this alternative strategy in the hopes that that'll work instead.
Is it a surprise that the handful of moderates are so adamant in their opposition? They haven't been talking a lot in the past couple of weeks.
Well, in some ways, this is something that this is not a unique issue that we've seen before over the years when Congress has been debating a major legislation. For example, back in 2017, House Republicans were very eager to deliver on nearly a decade of promises to repeal the 2010 health care law, known as Obamacare. And after having similarly encountering frustrations like Democrats are experiencing right now with internal party divisions and repeatedly struggling to get the bill over the finish line, they also were moving forward with voting on their own proposal without a CBO score. And so they also encountered some resistance with that. And so it's a similar issue where oftentimes legislating can be rather rushed in Congress, but at the same time, the centrists really want to send a message that they're being deliberate in how they take up this bill.
Do you think that the Tuesday's elections results had anything to do with this?
Absolutely. Democrats were already facing pretty long odds to keep their House majority next year. After all, Republicans only need to flip 5 seats to take back the majority. That's how small of a margin Democrats have right now. And then after seeing Democrats lose the Virginia governor's race, where Tuesday was the first time in 12 years a Republican had won statewide in Virginia. And then in New Jersey, the Democratic incumbent governor barely won re-election. And so that's really sent panic waves on Capitol Hill for Democrats that they really need to deliver on their agenda in the hopes of getting their voters out next year and with any level of enthusiasm.
Cristina Marcos, congressional reporter for The Hill. Read her work at thehill.com. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And here's a little bit of how the day went when the House met Friday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern. Members given an opportunity to speak for 1 minute on any subject. Republican Glenn Grothman of Wisconsin chose as his topic the Democrats' social spending plans.
This is a potentially very black day for America. I want to emphasize some things that I think are very significant that haven't received enough attention. We are paying for the government to care for 3- and 4-year-olds. Traditionally in America, the raising of the children is the responsibility of the parents. I know there are people, Marxists, who believe that raising the children is the responsibility of the state. But this is a sad day for America in which the federal government, against the Constitution, by the way, is going to weigh in and say taking care of the 3-year-olds is the responsibility of government. Not mom, not dad, not grandma and grandpa, the government. The next thing is a big push towards encouraging illegal immigration. We are paying in this bill free college for people who are here illegally, something that the American middle class doesn't get. The American middle class kids, they're going 30 or 40 grand in debt. We're giving free college for people who come here illegally. What a shame. I guess it matches the free health care. Well, the average American's sitting there looking at a $10,000 deductible.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Glenn Grothman on the House floor Friday morning. Responding a few minutes later, Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas. And then you're going to hear Republican Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona. He talks about border security and then calls a protest vote.
Madam Speaker, I do want to stand and refute with a spirit of joy this morning one of my friends on the other side who called this day a Black Day. I wonder what that interpretation means, but I see a sense of great future for America. And I wonder how many of the 3- and 4-year-olds in the future will wind up in the office of a presidency of the United States, because we in America and we as Democrats gave them a head start, an early head start. And if any of my colleagues have ever visited child care, pre-K, and seen the brightness of our children, they know that what Democrats are doing today creates a black, not that, but a brightness. And so today is going to be a bright day in America as Democrats govern and lead and make a difference in this nation and in this world. I'm glad to stand with the American people and families as we create for them a very bright day. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona rise?
I rise to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I appreciate that. Madam Speaker, while the border is porous and 200,000 people are being apprehended every month, another 100,000 illegally entering who we don't know where they're coming from. They're not caught. They're gotaways. This administration is going to offer $450,000. And what's interesting about that is the president himself said he didn't know about it. He's had to walk that back, hasn't he? So there will be $450,000 offered to a certain segment of illegal migrants. Not only that, we'll continue to see opioids, fentanyl. We'll see drugs and additional drugs and human trafficking continue across our border until we secure our border. And I'm hoping this administration will make that a priority rather than ignoring it and encouraging people to come across our border. And Madam Speaker, with that, I move to adjourn.
The question now occurs on the motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from Arizona.
I request the yeas and nays.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device.
Congresswoman Diana DeGette, a Democrat from Colorado, in the Speaker's chair. Andy Biggs, Republican from Arizona, calling for that motion to adjourn. That was early morning Friday, and that vote was held open for over 7 hours. Later found out that the reason why was that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was meeting with members of her caucus, particularly the moderate Democrats who were not yet sold on voting for the larger social spending bill that they wanted to bring to the floor. CQ Roll Call putting out a summary of that bill that the Democratic leadership was planning to vote on, saying it provides an estimated $2 trillion in tax cuts and investments to tackle climate change, support families and children, and provide affordable health care, and would be fully offset by tax increases on corporations and the wealthy and other offsets, according to the White House. While the Speaker was meeting with those House Democrats, the House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy from California held a news conference on Capitol Hill with his take. This was about halfway through that motion to adjourn vote.
Can you believe the vote is still open? You know, we made history today. This is the longest vote held open in the history of Congress, just because they don't have the votes for their bill today. We're moments away from voting on a 2,145-page bill. Advanced in the dead of night, finalized a few hours ago, and not one person in this body has read it. Only 10% of Americans say they know what is in this bill, according to a CBS poll. But I bet that percentage is even smaller on the Democratic conference. The Congressional Budget Office has not shown the American people exactly how much this bill will cost, as required by the Congressional Budget Act and the rules of our House. And the CBO reports that they will only arrive as American families get an enormous receipt from their Thanksgiving dinner. There will not be a CBO score until Thanksgiving. One clue we have of the price tag, however, comes from Wharton School. Their budget model, it states that the true cost of the Democrats' bill is $4 trillion. That's twice as high as Democrats have advertised, or even 4 times, because the president says it costs nothing. Are members of Congress even aware of this estimate? While Democrats' reconciliation plan has no transparency, Tuesday's results show an important truth. Voters from Virginia to Texas to Seattle to Minneapolis to New Jersey sent a mandate to their elected officials. Stop catering to the progressive left and work on solutions that will improve the lives of your constituents. Even the New York Times editorial board agrees. Elements of the reconciliation plan are part of a sharp leftward push in the party. The New York Times agrees. You got thousands to millions of voters who just gave you a very clear message. And where are the Democrats today? Breaking their own rules, setting new records of just keeping votes open, and trying to intimidate and bully members to vote for something. Why? So Speaker Pelosi can get on her jet and go to Europe for the 3rd time in 3 months. They really should be working on fixing our supply chain crisis, but the Democratic policies will create even more disruptions by shipping more of our businesses overseas. It appears congressional Democrats want to do everything possible to continue to make things worse. The vote today is rushed and irresponsible. It just continues to raise the question of a speaker. Is she more concerned of just being a lame duck, getting on her farewell tour, or working for the American public?
The House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy news conference with reporters. He was also asked about today's jobs report. CNBC reporting the U.S. job market snapped back in October with non-farm payroll rising more than expected, while the unemployment rate fell to 4.6%, according to the Labor Department. Non-farm payrolls increasing by 531,000 for the month, compared with the Dow Jones estimate of 450,000. Jobless rate had been expected to edge down to 4.7%. Here again is Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
What did you make of this morning's unemployment numbers, the job numbers? More than 500,000 jobs created in the month of October. Is that a good sign for the Biden economy?
That's great for America. Well, to the Bidens, I don't know. They've been utilizing their poor job numbers to say why they need Build Back Better. So if this was the case today, why would you need the bill?
Congressman Kevin McCarthy. At the White House, President Biden talking about those 2 issues, the jobs report and the spending bills pending before the Congress. We'll start with the jobs report.
It's another great day for our economic recovery. Americans are getting back to work. Our economy is starting to work for more Americans. Thanks to the economic plan we put through in Congress earlier this year and a successful vaccine deployment, America continues to add jobs at a record pace. In this historically strong recovery, unemployment rate has fallen again today, down to 4.6%. This included a substantial drop in unemployment for Hispanics, which was much needed. Our economy is on the move. This morning, we learned that in October, our economy created 531,000 jobs, well above expectations. We also learned that job growth over the prior 2 months, August and September, was nearly 250,000 more jobs than previously thought. In total, the job creation in the first full 9 months of my administration is about 5.6 million new jobs, a record for any new president. That's a monthly average of over 60,000 new jobs each month, 10 times more than the job creation at 3 months before I took office. New unemployment claims have fallen every week for the past 5 weeks, are down by more than 60% since I took office, and are now at the lowest level since the pandemic started. And people continue to move from unemployment rolls to work. Unemployment has decreased this year by more than any other year since 1950. So any year since 1950, unemployment has decreased more in this year than since 1950.
President Joe Biden in the White House State Dining Room. He went on to talk about what he says is still needed, in his view, to keep the economic recovery going. 2 things he wants: more COVID-19 vaccinations and getting his domestic spending agenda signed into law.
The pandemic is not yet behind us, but within this week's announcements, vaccines for kids, more adults getting vaccinated, potential treatment for those who get sick, we're accelerating our path out of this pandemic. The second way to make sure recovery is fully felt is to pass my bipartisan infrastructure agreement and my Build Back Better plan, which are being debated now. And I'm going to be heading over there shortly after I do this press conference, back to my office to make some calls. I want to say very clearly, if your number one issue is the cost of living, the number one priority should be seeing Congress pass these bills. 17 Nobel Prize winners in economics have spontaneously wrote to me together and said this will lower inflationary pressure on the economy when we pass my bills. A new analysis from the Wall Street firm of Moody's Analytics found that it will ease the financial burden of inflation for middle-class families. Put another way, these bills will provide families with, as my dad used to say, just a little more breathing room. That's because the Build Back Better framework lowers your bills for health care, child care, prescription drugs, and preschool. And families get a tax cut. That's how you end some of the anxiety people are feeling about the economy. That's how we give people some breathing room. That's in addition to the infrastructure bill that will create millions of jobs rebuilding the arteries of our economy. And by the way, these 2 bills add up to the largest effort to combat climate change in the history of the United States of America.
President Joe Biden at the White House. Wall Street today, the Dow up 203, NASDAQ up 31, S&P up 17. Bloomberg reports that President Biden has met with Jerome Powell and Leo Brainerd, who are both considered potential choices for the position of Federal Reserve Board Chair. Powell is the current Fed chairman, and Brainerd is a Fed governor, each meeting with the president at the White House on Thursday. Bloomberg citing people familiar with the matter, not specifically named. President Biden said earlier this week that he plans to announce multiple Fed nominees fairly quickly. Washington Today continues in a moment.
And this is for all nonfiction book readers out there. Check out the new C-SPAN podcast about books. Each episode delves into news about the publishing industry, reports on bestsellers, trends, and book reviews. Now, this week's episode features former longtime president and publisher of Regnery Books, Margie Ross. She discusses the cancel culture in the publishing industry. We'll also look at some new nonfiction books by members of Congress, including Trump impeachment manager Adam Schiff of California. The About Books podcast. Find it and follow it wherever you get your podcasts, including on the new C-SPAN Now app.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Funeral service today for former Secretary of State Colin Powell at Washington National Cathedral. Powell died a few weeks ago from a rare blood cancer and complications from COVID-19. He was 84 years old. Colin Powell served in the U.S. Army 35 years, rising to 4-star general. He was National Security Advisor to President Ronald Reagan, Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton, and Secretary of State under President George W. Bush. Dignitaries attending today's funeral included President Joe Biden, former Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama, former Secretaries of State James Baker, Condoleezza Rice, Hillary Clinton, also former Defense Secretary Robert Gates, and the current chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Army General Mark Milley. Former President Bill Clinton did not attend. He is recovering from an infection. One tribute was from Richard Armitage, who was Deputy Secretary of State when Powell was Secretary. One of the stories Armitage tells is to show the lighter side of the boss.
Well, the third anecdote that I was going to say had to do with Secretary Powell, General Powell, Colin, CP, however you knew him, as Secretary of State. And visiting foreign minister from Sweden, Anna Lindh, was in. So she came in with her entourage, so the secretaries were very well appointed office. And she knew of Secretary Powell's affection for ABBA, and she knew of Secretary Powell's affection for Volvos. So she opened up a full CD set of ABBA and presented it to him. Colin immediately went down on one knee and sang the entire Mamma Mia to a very amused foreign minister from Sweden and to a gobsmacked U.S. delegation who had never seen anything like it.
Former Deputy Secretary of State Richard Armitage. Another speaker at today's funeral for Colin Powell, Madeleine Albright, who was Secretary of State right before Powell, 1997 to 2001.
Colin was incredibly cool. People in public life tend to hyperventilate. We open our mouths and the superlatives just gush forth. Greatest, worst, the biggest deal ever, the biggest disaster ever, as if each issue offered a choice between utopia and perdition. Over the decades, I sat in many meetings with Colin where I could almost hear his eyes roll. When it was his turn to speak, he was brilliant at bringing over-the-moon claims down to earth and distilling what truly mattered from what did not. His effectiveness was magnified by his lack of interest in racking up partisan debating points or improving how macho he could be as a negotiator. He cared only about achieving results, and somehow, through the strength of his personality, he made pragmatism charismatic. Colin Powell's legacy of service to the country he loved will long survive his passing, from rescuing fellow soldiers while in combat, to presiding over the rollback of aggression in the Middle East, to orchestrating after 9/11 a global alliance against al-Qaeda, to modernizing the practice of diplomacy. He devoted the full measure of his energy and skills to advancing national interests and to the common good.
Former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright. A third speaker at the Colin Powell funeral today at Washington National Cathedral was his son, Michael Powell, who's a former chair of the Federal Communications Commission. Michael Powell remembering the last moments the two had together.
The last night of his life, I walked in to see him. Now he was the one lying in an ICU bed. He could not see or speak to me. So I took his hand, just as he had taken mine decades before. I knew everything was not going to be okay. I wanted him to be at peace. But again, I felt my father's love in that hand. That hand that took my mother's hand in matrimony. That hand that held me as a baby. That hand that signed report cards, tossed baseballs, and fixed old cars. That hand that signed treaties and war orders, saluted service members, and gestured joyfully while telling a story. That hand is still now. But it left a deep imprint on the lives of family and dear friends, soldiers and sailors, presidents and prime ministers, and a generation of aspiring young people. Ralph Waldo Emerson said that the purpose of life is not to be happy, it is to be useful, to be honorable, to be compassionate, to have it make some difference that you have lived and lived well. my father made a monumental difference. He lived. He lived well. I've heard it asked, are we still making his kind? I believe the answer to that question is up to us. To honor his legacy, I hope we do more than consign him to the history books. I hope we recommit ourselves to being a nation where we are still making his kind. For as he said in his autobiography, his journey was an American journey. Colin Powell was a great lion with a big heart. We will miss him terribly.
Michael Powell, son of former Secretary of State Colin Powell, who died last month. Funeral service today at Washington National Cathedral. CNN reports the musical selections for the funeral's organ and brass prelude were a mix of patriotic songs, religious hymns, and popular music, including Bob Marley's Three Little Birds, a nod to his Jamaican heritage, and ABBA's Dancing Queen, as Powell was a noted fan of the Swedish pop group. We covered the funeral in its entirety. You can find the video at cspan.org. Current Secretary of State Antony Blinken giving an update today on efforts to identify the cause of a debilitating health situation affecting a number of U.S. personnel stationed in other countries, officially called anomalous health incidents, or AHIs, unofficially known as Havana Syndrome, because it first showed up in Havana, Cuba. Now it's in several countries. Symptoms including headaches and dizziness and cognitive difficulties, vertigo, trouble with seeing and hearing and balancing. Some people who have been hit by this diagnosed with traumatic brain injuries. Secretary Blinken saying the incidents have inflicted profound physical and physiological harm.
We're working tirelessly with partners across the government to identify what is causing these incidents and to learn who is responsible. This is an urgent priority for President Biden, for me, for our entire government. And we will do absolutely everything we can, leaving no stone unturned, to stop these occurrences as swiftly as possible. And while I can't go into all the ways we're doing that, I want to assure you that we're pursuing every possible lead and sparing no resources, including when it comes to protecting personnel around the world. We're drawing on the full capacity of our intelligence community. We're enlisting the best scientific minds inside and outside of government. We're also very fortunate to have Congress as a partner in this. Their attention and leadership on this issue has been vital. For example, they recently enacted the Havana Act, which provides an additional benefit to federal employees who suffered serious harm from these incidents. Sixth, we're developing, obtaining, and deploying technology to the field to protect our personnel. The details I can provide on this are limited as well, but I can say that new technology is helping us more quickly and thoroughly evaluate a variety of potential causes of these incidents, and we've distributed across posts so that we can respond rapidly to new reports.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken, part of his remarks today at the State Department in Washington. He also named 2 career diplomats to oversee the department's response to Havana Syndrome. More information from the Pentagon today about a headline this week in a Pentagon report to Congress noting that China is rapidly expanding its nuclear arsenal and could have 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030. Bloomberg reporter Anthony Capaccio questioning the Pentagon press secretary John Kirby.
On the 1,000 warheads, the headline that's bounced around the world, can you clarify this point? Does DoD project that all 1,000 of these warheads, if they're ever produced, will all be mounted on Chinese silo and mobile ICBMs capable of hitting the U.S., like the DF-5 and DF-31, or does the 1,000 include short and medium-range ballistic missiles?
Tony, what I can tell you is that the estimate pertains to all missiles, to include medium range, intermediate range, and intercontinental.
Okay. Can you also give a sense for how DoD derived the number 1,000? Is it a guesstimate vetted by the intelligence community? You've seen some analysts are already opining that the number is hyped and inflated to justify more Pentagon spending on nuclear modernization.
The China Military Power Report is mandated by Congress every year, and its intent is to provide our best assessment and analysis over China military growth and development, their programs, their capabilities, their operational concepts. It's not meant to drive budget bottom lines or top lines. And as for the number, it's a DoD projection. And we, again, provide our best accurate assessment of the PRC's military and security developments. The information in the report is compiled through inputs and analysis from across the department's enterprise, and it's coordinated with other departments and agencies across the U.S. government.
Okay, because last year the DoD was projecting it'd be 400 missiles by the end of the decade, and now we're saying by 1,000. So you got to wonder, was that an intelligence failure last year?
It's look, Tony, this is an iterative process, and it's a yearly report, and our assessments and analysis are ongoing, literally, continually. So I wouldn't phrase this as anything other than, again, an iterative process of analyzing and assessing, and we cast a wide net when we do that. Every year the report, you know this, I mean, you've seen it, every year it changes because every year China's military capabilities change, and we have to stay up to speed with that.
The Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby in the Pentagon briefing room, the reporter on the phone. The U.S. stockpile of nuclear weapons is approximately 3,700. This weekend, most of the United States will turn their clocks back an hour and begin observing daylight saving time. 2 U.S. senators, one Republican, one Democrat, sponsoring a bill to make this fallback permanent, daylight saving time all year. The Republican is Marco Rubio of Florida. He posted a short video this week.
Well, we're about to once again do this annual craziness of changing the clock, falling back, springing forward. We need to stop doing it. There's no justification for it. Let's go to permanent daylight savings time. The overwhelming majority of members of Congress approve that and support it. Let's get it done. Let's get it passed so that we never have to do this stupid change again.
Senator Marco Rubio, his posted video. He's sponsoring his bill along with Democratic Senator Patty Murray of Washington State, and she spoke on the Senate floor on Thursday.
This Sunday, millions of Americans are going to once again roll their clocks back, and in no time next spring, they'll have to roll their clocks forward. For what reason? I don't know a single person who loves to go through the trouble of figuring out whether their microwave or their oven has the hour right, or anyone who looks forward to the sun setting earlier and earlier every winter. But beyond convenience, this really is a matter of health and safety. Studies have shown that our switch to standard time can increase rates of seasonal depression, as well as heart problems and the risk of stroke. Researchers also believe that if we made daylight saving time permanent, there would be fewer car accidents and evening robberies, thanks to a more regular schedule and an extra hour of sun. And there are studies that indicate permanent daylight savings time could offset reduced economic activity that we see during standard time and even lead to greater energy saving. The people in my home state of Washington know this. That's why we have already passed legislation to switch to permanent daylight savings time. And it is not just Washington. States across the country, from Florida and California and Maine and many more, have now passed legislation in their states or resolutions to make daylight saving time year-round. But they are powerless to enact the overwhelming will of the people until they get federal approval. To put it simply, Madam President, Americans want more sunshine and less depression. That is actually why I'm very proud to co-sponsor the bipartisan Sunshine Protection Act of 2021, which would extend daylight savings time permanently.
Senator Patty Murray on the Senate floor on Thursday. So why is a federal law needed? The USA Today article explains the ultimate stumbling block for fans of year-round daylight saving time is the federal 1966 Uniform Time Act, which became law because of the random way states had been observing daylight saving time up till then. The act said states either have to change the clocks to daylight saving time at a specific time and day, or stick with standard time throughout the year. The only power individual states or territories have under the act is to opt out of daylight saving time, putting them on standard time permanently. That's practiced by Arizona, Hawaii, Guam, American Samoa, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Reporting from USA Today. Thanks for listening today to Washington Today. For more top Washington stories, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter Word for Word at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we're taking your calls live, on the air, on the news of the day. And we'll discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Saturday morning, we'll talk about the developments from this week's United Nations Climate Change Conference with Sarah Schoenhardt from E&E News. Then Washington Times podcast host Cheryl Chumley talks about this week's election results, efforts to pass Biden administration initiatives in Congress, and other political news of the day. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Saturday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our new mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, text messages, and tweets.